Hello and welcome back to my channel and the 2020 wrap-up video. So this year is also coming to an end. It was a year with a lot of free time for reading, for me personally, and I managed to read and complete 15 books. However, I read much more than just 15 books because there are many books that I have started to read earlier this year but haven't finished yet, so they will not count in this wrap-up. I love starting books, but finishing them is more challenging sometimes if I am not in the right mood for a particular book. Some of my current reads I am halfway through, like Crime and Punishment, The Essex Serpent, The Return of the Native, Under the Greenwood Tree, and I actually like them all, yet I am waiting for the right moment to pick them up again and finish them. And my most recent read or current read is The Name of the Wind, which I am enjoying quite a lot, by the way. Despite the low number of the books that I completed, I actually quite enjoyed them all, and the average rating this year for me was 4 stars, which I believe is a good thing. So it was a good reading year for me. So to quickly go over the books that I have read this year, I will divide them into 3 groups: the rereads, the new reads, and one series that I finished this year. So let's get started, and as always, with classics. This year I reread 4 classics. I think classics might be the only kind of books that I want to read twice. And that is, as I have mentioned a lot previously, is because of the beautiful language that these books contain within their pages. And I just realized while making this video that 3 of these were by Charlotte Bronte. So I was only 1 book short of rereading all her completed novels. The first 3 Charlotte books that I reread were Shirley, Jane Eyre, and The Professor. Shirley and Jane Eyre made me love the books even more on the second read. I understood them more, I liked the characters more, and overall enjoyed them both very much. I think I'll be reading them even more times in the future. They both are about female protagonists. Shirley is about 2 female characters, even though the name refers to only one, both of whom are very different from each other, yet become close friends. And if you combine them both, in my opinion, you will have Jane Eyre. For I think she has a lot of similarity to the 2 characters in Shirley. The 3 inspire and blow my mind each time I read about them, and I just love Charlotte for creating such amazing characters, such beautiful books, that I really want to shake hands with her and tell her thank you. And then there is The Professor, which to my disappointment, I didn't like as much as the first time I read it. I don't know if it is because I am older now or because I have read more books by now than when I first read it, or maybe both reasons. It still is a good book, just not Charlotte's best or very well done book. For I have come to consider Charlotte as one of the greatest writers of all times, and reading Shirley and Jane Eyre makes The Professor, in comparison, a kind of weaker book. It's about a man who goes to Brussels to teach there, and there he meets some people, one in particular that will change his life and make a profound influence on him. The 4th book that I reread was Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I believe I have to read an Austen novel every now and then, and when I do, I realize how much I miss her world and her books. They are so fun to read and are so cleverly written. Mansfield Park is not my favorite of Austen's novel, and I remember enjoying Mansfield Park when I read it, yet when I read it this time, I enjoyed it even more. I came to understand Fanny's character more, and I found that it was more profound and deeper than I remembered it. And now to the new reads. These also contain 3 classics and 2 non-classics. And they are the first book that I read by each respective author. First is White Fang, which was a book that I heard mentioned quite a lot and one that I wanted to read at some point. It was very refreshing. The story makes you feel as if you can understand a wolf's mind, how he thinks, and basically to live in his wilderness, which took me by surprise. And I loved it a lot. It made me more interested to read The Call of the Wild by the same author, which I believe is a reverse case to this book, in that a wolf is inside a domestic home and then, I believe, goes to the wilderness. And White Fang is the opposite, that a wolf is in the wilderness and then meets a man and goes with him to live in his house. Then there is A Room with a View by E.M. Forster, which is a story of a young female named Lucy Honeychurch, who in her first trip to Italy comes upon ideas and realizations that conflict with her middle-class English principles. She gets engaged to a man and falls in love with another while meeting him in Rome. I didn't much like the romance in this book, and I didn't like the writing. I'm not familiar with this era of English literature. I don't know if it's the book or it's me, but I didn't quite like it. I think I gave it a 2.5 or a 3-star rating. And in September, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which was one of those books that I heard about everywhere, but never thought of reading, thinking I wouldn't like it. And how wrong I was. It's a gothic tale about a young woman who marries a much older man whose wife has died, but who appears to influence him and his household even after her death. It was a very well done book that I greatly enjoyed and had a great time reading it, and one which I would highly recommend. Then there is The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Old School, which is the 10th book of the series. It's a satirical, realistic comedy series made for kids about a boy named Greg and his life in school and with his very entertaining family. I have not read all the other books, nor I remember watching the TV show, but it was a very fun read, and I may read the other books in the series as well. I also read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy, which is a collection of illustrations about these 4 characters and how they meet and their views of life. It's very heartwarming and it's very meaningful, and I would highly recommend it. And now to the series that I completed this year and has become one of my favorite series of all times. The Mortal Engine series. I don't see or hear many booktubers talk about the series, but the movie made it somehow more famous when it was released about 2 years ago. I read the first book before the movie was out. It was gifted to me by a dear friend, and because I loved the book so much, my sisters decided to buy the whole series for me as a birthday present. It is a young adult post-apocalyptic fantasy steampunk series, and it can be divided into 2 sub-series. One, a quartet that starts with Mortal Engines, and the movie is based on the first book, that is about cities like London that are on wheels. They go after and prey on smaller cities. Much like the law of nature, the survival for the strongest, in this case, the strongest city. So we follow 2 characters, Hester and Tom, and their adventures in this wonderful world. These books just got better and better as I read along. I did not find a single boring page inside them. And the second sub-series is a trilogy, the actions of which happen centuries prior to the Mortal Engines and before the birth of moving cities. I thought I loved the quartet so much I couldn't like this one better, but from the first chapter, I knew that I would probably like this trilogy even more. This one is about Fever Crump and how her world changes when she discovers a big secret that is connected with her family and herself. My favorite book of all the 7 books of the series is probably A Web of Air, the second book of the Fever Crumb trilogy. I need a whole video to talk about why, but suffice to say that the city in this book is the most beautifully imagined city I have read in any fantasy world. So, out of all the books that I read this year and I'm currently reading, I would recommend this series. 7 books can be a lot, but trust me, it's so much fun, you won't regret it. So, this was my very humble wrap up. I hope you had a good reading year as well, and I'm very excited for the book that I'll be reading in 2021 by God's will. Till we meet again next year. Stay safe.